1 hour. Dr. Martinez's voice cut through the hospital room like a blade. Your son has 1 hour, maybe 2. Without a bone marrow match, his organs will shut down. I'm sorry, Mr. Rhodes. There's nothing more we can do. Franklin Rhodes stared at his 7-year-old son lying in the hospital bed, machines beeping, skin pale as death. There has to be something, Franklin whispered. I have billions. I can pay for anything. It's not about money, Dr. Martinez said quietly. There's no match. We've searched every database in North America. Your son's blood type is too rare. Franklin collapsed into the chair beside Julian's bed, broken. The doctor left, and that's when the door opened. A woman in a janitor's uniform stepped in, pushing a cleaning cart. She glanced at the chart on the wall. Her face went white. Her hands started trembling, and she whispered 4 words that would change everything. I'm a perfect match. Franklin's head snapped up. The janitor was staring at Julian with tears in her eyes. What did you just say? She looked at him, this billionaire whose money couldn't save his son, and made a choice that would destroy every wall she'd built to protect herself. I said I'm a match, Martha Green repeated, her voice shaking. And I can save your son's life. What Franklin didn't know, what no one in that hospital knew, was that the woman in the janitor's uniform used to be one of their best doctors. And she'd been hiding for 3 years. You just watched a billionaire realize that all his money, all his power, all his resources mean nothing when his child is dying. But you don't know who the janitor really is. You don't know why she disappeared from the medical system. And you don't know what impossible choice she's about to make that will change both their lives forever. If you need to understand how one moment can force you to choose between protecting yourself and saving a stranger's child, if you want to see what happens when the person everyone overlooks turns out to be the only one who can help, then stay with me. Because this story is about to show you that sometimes being a hero means facing the thing you've been running from for years. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to remember this. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. To the day Martha Green stopped being a doctor. Martha Green had been invisible for 3 years. It was a choice. A deliberate, carefully maintained choice. Every morning at 5 a.m., she put on the navy blue janitor's uniform, pulled her hair back, and became someone nobody looked at twice. Someone nobody asked questions about. Someone who could move through Massachusetts General Hospital cleaning floors and emptying trash cans without anyone remembering her name. It was safe. It was anonymous. It was the opposite of who she used to be. 3 years ago, Martha was Dr. Martha Green, third-year surgical resident at this exact hospital. 27 years old, top of her class at Johns Hopkins Medical School, recipient of the prestigious Halstead Residency Award for Excellence in Surgery. She'd been brilliant. She'd been rising. She'd been everything her parents had sacrificed for 2 Haitian immigrants, who'd worked 3 jobs between them to put her through college, who'd cried with joy the day she got her white coat, who'd believed she was going to change the world. And then came the night that ended everything. A car accident on I-93. Multiple casualties. Martha was on trauma rotation, 4th hour of a 36-hour shift, exhausted but functional. Or so she thought. A teenager came in 16 years old, chest trauma, internal bleeding. Martha was assisting the attending physician, Dr. Chen, holding retractors while he worked to repair a torn artery. She'd been holding the retractor for 40 minutes. Her hands were steady. Her focus was sharp. And then she blinked. Just once. Just for a second. But in that second, her grip shifted. The retractor slipped. Dr. Chen's hand moved to compensate, but the scalpel nicked an adjacent vessel. Blood everywhere. Alarms. Chaos. They saved the kid. Barely. He survived with permanent nerve damage in his left arm. The hospital review board investigated. They found that Martha had been working over the legal limit of consecutive hours, that the attending physician should have called for a break, that the hospital's scheduling system was at fault. They cleared her of wrongdoing, but Martha couldn't clear herself. She saw that boy's face every time she closed her eyes, saw the blood, saw the moment her exhaustion had cost someone their future. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't pick up a scalpel without her hands shaking. She resigned 2 weeks later. Her parents didn't understand. Her colleagues tried to convince her it wasn't her fault, that every surgeon has close calls, that she couldn't let one mistake define her career. But it wasn't just a mistake. It was proof that she wasn't good enough. that people trusted her with their lives and she failed them. So she disappeared. She'd been working as a hospital janitor for 3 years now. Different name on her employment application, she went by her middle name, used her mother's maiden name. No one here knew she used to be Dr. Green. No one knew she had a medical degree. She cleaned operating rooms where she used to perform surgeries. She mopped floors in hallways where patients used to thank her for saving their lives. She emptied trash cans in the same break room where she used to study case files and debate treatment options with other residents. And every single day, she told herself this was what she deserved. To be invisible, to be powerless, to be someone who couldn't hurt anyone because no one trusted her with anything that mattered. It was punishment. It was penance. It was safe. Until the day she walked into room 547 and saw Julian Rhodes dying. Martha had been cleaning the pediatric oncology floor when the code blue alarm went off. She'd stepped aside, back against the wall, as doctors and nurses rushed past her toward room 547. She wasn't supposed to go in during an emergency. Janitors waited. Janitors stayed out of the way, but something pulled her to that door. She'd looked through the small window and seen the child in the bed. 7 years old, maybe 8, bald from chemotherapy. Skin pale, almost translucent. Machines beeping frantically. And she'd seen the blood type notation on his chart. AB negative, rare Bombay phenotype, subtype H deficient. Martha's breath had caught. She knew that blood type. She knew it because she had it. One of only a handful of documented cases in the country. The odds of randomly encountering someone with the same rare subtype were astronomical. The odds of that person being a dying child who needed exactly what she could give. Martha had backed away from the door, her heart racing. Not my problem. Not my responsibility. I'm not a doctor anymore. She'd finished her shift, clocked out, took the T home to her small studio apartment in Dorchester. She'd made dinner, tried to watch TV, tried to sleep, but all she could see was that child's face. The next day, she'd come back to work and learned his name. Julian Rhodes, son of Franklin Rhodes, the tech billionaire. The man who'd revolutionized artificial intelligence systems. The man whose company, Rhodes Innovations, was worth $30 billion. The man who could afford the best medical care in the world. And none of it mattered. Because his son needed something money couldn't buy. He needed a bone marrow match. And Martha was it. For 3 days, Martha watched from a distance. She saw Franklin Rhodes in the hallways, looking more exhausted each day. Designer suit wrinkled, tie loose, eyes red from crying. She saw the specialists coming and going, the experimental treatment consultations, the desperate phone calls Franklin made in the family waiting room, trying to find anyone, anywhere, who could help. She saw Julian through the window of room 547, getting weaker, the machines doing more of the work, the smiles he tried to give his father becoming fainter. And she knew what she had to do. She knew it would mean revealing who she was, what she'd hidden, the life she'd run from. She knew it would mean facing the thing that terrified her most, being responsible for someone's life again. But she also knew that if she walked away, that little boy would die, and she'd have to live with that for the rest of her life. On the 4th day, Martha walked into room 547 with her cleaning cart. Dr. Martinez was there, explaining to Franklin that they were out of options, out of time. Martha heard the words, 1 hour, maybe 2 at most, and felt her chest tighten. The doctor left. Franklin collapsed into the chair beside his son's bed, broken, and Martha stood there in her janitor's uniform, invisible as always, staring at the chart on the wall. She could leave, clock out, go home, pretend she never saw this. Or she could save him. Martha's hands were shaking as she reached for the chart. She shouldn't touch it. She wasn't authorized. She wasn't a doctor anymore, but she needed to be sure. Blood type, AB negative, Bombay phenotype, H deficient subtype. It was her. She was a match. Excuse me. Franklin's voice was sharp, irritated. You can't touch that. That's private medical information. Martha pulled her hand back, heart pounding. I'm sorry. Just clean and go, Franklin said, turning back to his son. Please. Martha stood there, frozen. Just leave. It's not your responsibility. You're not a doctor anymore. But Julian's breathing was getting shallower. The machines were beeping more frantically. Martha closed her eyes and saw the 16-year-old boy from 3 years ago, the one whose life she'd nearly ended because she wasn't good enough. And then she opened them and saw Julian, a 7-year-old who would die in the next hour if she didn't do something. She made a choice. "Mr. Rhodes," Martha said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Franklin didn't even look at her. "Not now, please. Your son needs a bone marrow transplant." "I know that," Franklin snapped. "The entire medical team has told me that. There are no matches. There's nothing. I'm a match." Silence. Franklin turned slowly, his face a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. "What?" Martha swallowed hard. "I have the same blood type, the same markers, AB negative, Bombay phenotype, H deficient. I'm one of the 3 documented cases in the country." Franklin stood up, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to determine if she was insane or if this was some cruel joke. "You're a janitor," he said slowly. "How would you even know?" "Because I used to be a doctor," Martha said, the words feeling like broken glass in her throat. "Doctor." "Martha Green. I was a surgical resident here 3 years ago. I left medicine, but I still have the medical records. I still know my blood type, and I know I can save your son." Franklin stared at her for a long moment. Then he ran to the door and shouted into the hallway, "Dr. Martinez, get in here, now!" The next hour was chaos. Dr. Martinez ran tests, confirmed Martha's blood type, verified her medical history, looked at her in complete shock when he realized who she was. "Dr. Green, you've been here this whole time, working as a janitor?" Martha didn't answer. She just kept her eyes on Julian, who was fading fast. "We need to prep her for extraction immediately, Doctor," Martinez said to Franklin. "But Mr. Rhodes, you need to understand this is an emergency procedure. There are risks." For both of them, Martha could experience complications from the rapid extraction, and Julian's body might still reject the transplant. "What are the odds?" Franklin asked. "Without this, 0. Your son dies within the hour. With this," Dr. Martinez paused, "60%, maybe 70 if we move fast." Franklin looked at Martha, really looked at her for the first time. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Martha thought about the last 3 years, about hiding, about punishing herself, about being invisible. And she thought about the boy she'd almost killed 3 years ago, who survived, who got a second chance. "Because I can," she said simply, "and because he deserves a chance to live." Franklin's eyes filled with tears. "I can pay you whatever you want. Name your price." "I don't want your money," Martha said. "I just want to save your son." They prepped Martha in the adjacent operating room. She lay on the table in a hospital gown, an IV in her arm, trying not to think about the last time she'd been in an OR, trying not to remember the blood, the alarms, the moment everything went wrong. A nurse, someone Martha used to work with, came in to start the anesthesia prep. She did a double take when she saw Martha's face. "Dr. Green?" she whispered. "Oh my God, is that you?" Martha closed her eyes. "Not anymore. What are you doing here? Why are you—" "I'm saving a kid's life," Martha said. "That's all that matters." The procedure took 45 minutes. They extracted bone marrow from Martha's hip, a painful process even with anesthesia. Her body screamed in protest she wasn't in the physical condition she used to be. 3 years of manual labor had made her strong, but not in the ways medicine required. But she didn't care about the pain. All she cared about was that when they wheeled her out of the OR, still groggy from anesthesia, they took the vial of bone marrow straight to Julian. She'd done it. She'd given him a chance. Now it was up to his body to accept the gift. Martha woke up in a recovery room 6 hours later. Her hip throbbed. Her head was fuzzy from the anesthesia, but she was alive. And more importantly, he's responding. Dr. Martinez stood in the doorway, smiling for the first time in days. "Julian, the transplant is taking. His body is accepting the marrow. We won't know for sure for another 48 hours, but the initial signs are incredibly promising." Martha felt tears slide down her face. "He's going to live?" "Because of you," Dr. Martinez said. "You saved that boy's life, Dr. Green." The title felt wrong. Foreign. She wasn't Dr. Green anymore. She was just Martha. the janitor who'd made a choice. "How's his father?" Martha asked. Dr. Martinez's expression shifted to something complicated. "He wants to see you. He's been waiting outside your room for 3 hours." Martha's stomach tightened. "Tell him I'm fine. He doesn't need to thank me." "I don't think he wants to thank you," Dr. Martinez said carefully. "I think he wants answers. Here's what breaks my heart about this moment. Martha spent 3 years punishing herself for one mistake, one moment of exhaustion that she couldn't forgive herself for. She walked away from medicine, from her calling, from the thing she was brilliant at because she believed she didn't deserve to heal people anymore. And yet, when it mattered most, when a child was dying and she was the only one who could help, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. She risked everything. She did the thing that terrified her most. She saved a life. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've made a mistake that you can't forgive yourself for. Maybe you've walked away from something you loved because you believed you weren't good enough anymore. Maybe you've been punishing yourself for years, telling yourself you don't deserve a second chance. But what if you're wrong? What if that mistake doesn't define you? What if you're still capable of extraordinary things if you can just forgive yourself enough to try? Subscribe if you believe that one mistake doesn't erase all the good you're capable of doing. Because maybe the bravest thing you can do is give yourself permission to be human and still show up when it matters. Franklin Rhodes walked into Martha's recovery room like a man who hadn't slept in days. Because he hadn't. He looked at her, this woman in a hospital bed, still in her recovery gown, who'd saved his son's life, and he didn't know whether to fall to his knees in gratitude or demand answers. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why were you working as a janitor when you're a doctor?" Martha looked away. "I'm not a doctor anymore. The hospital says you were one of their best residents, top of your class, awards, commendations, a future in surgery." Franklin's voice rose. "And you threw it all away to clean floors?" "I didn't throw it away," Martha said quietly. "I lost it. There's a difference." "Then explain it to me," Franklin said, pulling a chair up beside her bed. "Because my son is alive right now because of you. Because you had the medical knowledge to recognize his condition, the rare blood type to match him, and the courage to step forward when you could have stayed invisible. That's not someone who lost anything. That's someone who's exactly where they're supposed to be." Martha shook her head. "You don't understand. So help me understand." And something about his voice, the desperation, the need to make sense of what had happened, broke through Martha's defenses. She told him everything. About the car accident, the teenager, the retractor that slipped, the blood. About the review board that cleared her but couldn't clear her conscience. About the nightmares that still woke her up at 3 a.m., heart racing, hands shaking. About the 3 years she'd spent convincing herself she was protecting people by not being a doctor anymore. "I almost killed someone," Martha finished, her voice breaking. "I almost ended a 16-year-old's life because I was too exhausted to hold a retractor steady. How was I supposed to trust myself after that? How was I supposed to go back into an OR and ask patients to trust me when I couldn't even trust myself?" Franklin was quiet for a long moment. "Did the boy survive?" he finally asked. "Yes." "And you saved my son's life today. That's different, is it?" Franklin leaned forward. "Martha, I've built a career on calculated risks, on understanding odds, on making decisions based on data. And here's what the data tells me. You made one mistake in your entire medical career. One. In a situation where you were overworked, undersupported, and pushed beyond safe limits by a broken system." He gestured toward the door, toward the hospital beyond. "Do you know how many doctors out there have made similar mistakes? How many have lost patients? How many have had outcomes worse than yours? And they kept going. They learned. They improved. They forgave themselves." "I couldn't." "You couldn't forgive yourself," Franklin said. "I understand that, but you just donated bone marrow to a complete stranger's child. You put yourself through pain and risk to save a boy you'd never met. If that's not the definition of a healer, I don't know what is." Martha felt tears sliding down her face. "Your son is going to need follow-up care," Franklin continued. "Monitoring, potential complications, and I want you to be the one overseeing it." Martha's head snapped up. "What?" "Come back to medicine," Franklin said. "Not as a janitor. As the doctor you were always meant to be." "I can't." You can, Franklin interrupted. I've already spoken with Dr. Martinez, with the hospital board. They want you back. They've wanted you back for 3 years. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. Martha had spent 3 years in hiding, punishing herself for a mistake that everyone else had already forgiven. She'd convinced herself that she didn't deserve to be a doctor anymore, that she was too broken, too unreliable, too dangerous. But when a child's life was on the line, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. She used every ounce of medical knowledge she'd tried to bury. She became exactly who she was always meant to be. And that's the thing about calling it doesn't disappear just because you run from it. Maybe you've been running too. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're not good enough, not worthy, not capable of the thing you were made to do. Maybe one failure has convinced you that you should give up entirely. But what if that failure was just preparing you for this moment? What if everything you've been through was getting you ready for the moment when someone needs you most? Subscribe if you're learning like Martha that maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself and start believing you deserve a second chance. Martha spent 2 days in recovery. During that time, Franklin visited her every few hours, bringing updates on Julian, bringing flowers, bringing job offers from 3 different hospitals who'd heard what happened and wanted her on their staff. "You're a medical miracle story," Franklin said during one visit. "The doctor who sacrificed herself to save a billionaire's son. Every hospital in Boston wants to hire you." "I don't want to be a story," Martha said. "I just want Julian to be okay." "He's more than okay," Franklin said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's thriving." The transplant took better than anyone expected. "Dr. Martinez says if he continues improving at this rate, he could be in remission within 6 months. Martha felt relief flood through her. "That's wonderful. It's because of you," Franklin said. "And I want to repay you. You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything," Franklin interrupted. "My son is alive because you stepped forward when you could have stayed hidden. So I'm offering you whatever you want. Name it. A position at any hospital, a research grant, a fully funded clinic in your name. Whatever you want, it's yours." Martha looked at this man who'd had everything money could buy except the one thing that mattered, and she thought about what she'd learned in 3 years of invisibility. "I don't want money," she said. "And I don't want recognition." Franklin frowned. "Then what do you want?" Martha took a breath. "I want you to fund a program for medical residents, one that addresses the systemic issues that lead to mistakes like mine. Mandatory rest periods, mental health support, surgical hour limits that are actually enforced. A culture where exhausted doctors aren't pushed beyond safe limits and then blamed when something goes wrong." She met his eyes. "I want you to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else. That some other resident doesn't have to carry the weight I've been carrying. That's what I want." Franklin stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Consider it done." 3 weeks later, Franklin Rhodes announced the establishment of the Green Medical Resident Wellness Initiative, a $50 million fund dedicated to resident physician mental health, work hour reform, and systemic safety improvements in teaching hospitals across the country. Named after Dr. Martha Green, the woman who'd saved his son. And when Martha protested, "I told you I didn't want recognition," Franklin just shrugged. "I didn't name it after the janitor," he said. "I named it after the doctor who's going back to medicine." Because Martha had made a decision. She'd accepted a position back at Mass General. Not as a surgical resident, she wasn't ready for that yet, but as a consulting physician in pediatric oncology, working with children like Julian, using her medical knowledge, healing instead of hiding. It terrified her. Every day she walked into the hospital in her white coat instead of her janitor's uniform, she felt like she was going to throw up. But she kept showing up, because Franklin had been right about something. She was a healer. It's who she was, and 3 years of running hadn't changed that. 6 months after the transplant, Julian Rhodes was declared cancer-free. Martha was there for the celebration in his hospital room, balloons, cake, and a 7-year-old boy with a full head of hair growing back, grinning ear to ear. "Doctor." "Martha," Julian shouted when he saw her, running to give her a hug. Martha knelt down, wrapping her arms around this child who'd given her a second chance at being who she was meant to be. "How are you feeling, buddy?" she asked. "Perfect," Julian said. Dad says you made me better. We all made you better, Martha corrected. It was a team effort. But you saved me, Julian insisted, then quieter. Why did you help me? Dad says you didn't have to. Martha thought about her answer carefully. Because when someone needs help and you can give it, she said, that's what you do. Even when it's hard, even when it scares you, you show up. Julian nodded seriously. Then he pressed something into her hand. A drawing, crayon on construction paper. 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small. Above them, in Julian's careful 7-year-old handwriting, Dr. Martha is a hero. Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. Thank you, Julian, she whispered. Franklin approached, his own eyes suspiciously wet. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked. They stepped into the hallway. I wanted you to know, Franklin said. The wellness initiative has already been implemented in 15 hospitals. We're seeing a 20% reduction in resident burnout, a 30% improvement in reported mental health, and 0 critical errors attributed to exhaustion in the pilot programs. Martha felt something loosen in her chest. That's incredible. It's because of you, Franklin said. Your story, your honesty about what happened. It's changing the conversation about how we treat medical residents. He paused. But there's something else. The teenager, the one from your incident 3 years ago. I found him. Martha's breath caught. What? His name is David Chen. He's 19 now. Pre-med at Boston University. He wants to be a trauma surgeon. Martha's legs felt weak. I almost destroyed his future. No, Franklin said gently. You gave him a story about why surgical safety matters, about why protocols exist, about why we need to take care of the people who take care of us. He's writing his medical school application essay about the experience, about how the resident who made a mistake taught him more about medicine than any textbook ever could. Franklin handed her a piece of paper. An email printout. Tell Dr. Green I don't blame her. Tell her she inspired me. Tell her I hope she comes back to medicine because the world needs doctors who care as much as she does. David. Martha read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Martha stood outside room 547, the same room where Julian had been dying 6 months ago, and watched Franklin help his son pack up the last of his belongings. They were going home. Julian was cancer-free, healthy, thriving, and Martha had her white coat back. Dr. Green? She turned to find a young woman in scrubs, one of the new surgical residents, approaching nervously. I just wanted to thank you, the resident said, for the wellness initiative, for speaking up about what happened to you. I've been working 80-hour weeks and I was terrified to say I was exhausted. But because of your program, I was able to request a schedule adjustment, and it probably saved a patient's life last week. Martha felt her throat tighten. I'm glad you spoke up. I almost didn't, the resident admitted. I thought asking for help made me weak, but then I read your interview in the medical journal about how hiding your struggles doesn't make you strong, it makes you dangerous. That changed everything for me. After she left, Martha stood there thinking about the last 6 months, about the $50 million program changing hospital culture, about David Chen, who'd forgiven her and was following in her footsteps, about Julian, who was alive and healthy and drawing pictures of her as a hero, about Franklin, who'd turned his gratitude into systemic change. But there was one more thing she needed to do. That evening, Martha drove to a small house in Mattapan. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding. A woman answered, Haitian, late 50s, with kind eyes that looked exactly like Martha's. Manman, Martha whispered. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Martha? Petite Mwen? They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since Martha had walked away from medicine. Not since she'd stopped returning calls, stopped visiting, stopped being the daughter her parents had sacrificed everything for. I'm sorry, Martha said, tears already falling. I'm so sorry I disappeared. I was ashamed. I thought I'd failed you. Her mother pulled her into a fierce embrace. You could never fail me, she whispered in Creole. You are my daughter, my heart. I have been waiting for you to come home. I'm a doctor again, Martha said. I went back. I'm helping people. I know, her mother said, smiling through tears. I saw the news. My daughter, saving a little boy's life. My daughter changing hospitals across the country. My daughter being exactly who I always knew you were. She cupped Martha's face. You were never broken, Cherry. You were just learning that even healers need healing sometimes. 6 months later, Martha stood in an operating room for the first time in 3 years. Not as the lead surgeon, just assisting, taking it slow, learning to trust herself again. Her hands were steady, her focus was clear, and when the surgery was over successful, flawless, she didn't feel the panic she'd expected. She felt peace, because she'd learned something in her 3 years of hiding. Running from your mistakes doesn't heal them. Punishing yourself doesn't undo them. The only way forward is through the shame, through the fear, through the belief that you don't deserve a second chance. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let someone show you grace when you can't show it to yourself. Franklin had offered Martha money. She'd asked for something better, a chance to turn her pain into purpose. And in doing so, she'd saved more than Julian's life. She'd saved her own. Here's what Martha's story teaches us. The bravest thing you can do isn't avoiding failure. It's getting back up after failure breaks you. Martha could have stayed hidden. She could have kept punishing herself, kept believing she didn't deserve to heal people anymore. She could have let one mistake define the rest of her life. But she didn't. She stepped forward when a child needed her. She faced the thing that terrified her. She let people see her vulnerability and used it to create change. And that choice, that one act of courage, didn't just save Julian. It saved hundreds of medical residents who now work in safer conditions. It saved David Chen, who learned that mistakes don't disqualify you from your calling. It saved Martha's relationship with her mother. It saved Martha's relationship with herself. One moment of grace, Franklin offering her a second chance, Martha accepting it, created a ripple effect that changed an entire system. Maybe you're carrying shame about something you did or didn't do. Maybe you've convinced yourself you don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve another chance, don't deserve to try again. But what if you're wrong? What if your greatest failure is preparing you for your greatest contribution? What if the world needs your story, not your perfection, but your honest struggle and hard-won wisdom? Subscribe if you believe that second chances aren't just about being forgiven, they're about forgiving yourself and choosing to show up anyway. Because maybe the person you're meant to save is waiting for you to be brave enough to try again. This is the story of Martha Green and Franklin Rhodes, a doctor who ran from her calling, and a billionaire who learned that money can't buy miracles, but grace can create them. Not because Martha was perfect, not because Franklin had all the answers, but because when it mattered most, they both chose something bigger than themselves. Martha chose to save a stranger's child even though it meant facing her worst fear. Franklin chose to turn his gratitude into systemic change that would help thousands. And together, they proved that sometimes the impossible thing isn't surviving the crisis. It's choosing to believe you deserve to heal from it. The end.